For our special interview this Friday, we wanted to explore the career of a two-time Pulitzer-winning photojournalist. With his time at the LA Times and the Associated Press, namely, he covered, most notably, the LA riots and the Clinton-Lewinsky scandal. Maybe you've spotted him on the famous Korean TV show held by Yoo Jae-suk. We're joined by Mr. Kang Hyungwon this morning on the line. Good morning.
Good morning.
I did a little bit of social media stalking and realized you're in Toronto as we speak.
Yes.
But you're continuously uploading your series, your pictures and your columns right here in Korea, right?
Yes. For journalists, deadline is something that we cannot escape, no matter where we are.
All right, that paints a pretty delicate picture of where you are right now. Just in case our listeners haven't seen your recent appearance on the Korean TV show, I wanted to talk about maybe the most talked about accomplishments in your career so far. Could you give us a picture of what it was really like covering historic moments like the 1992 LA riot and, of course, the Bill Clinton impeachment trial?
So next month, April 29th, is the 30th anniversary of the 1992 LA riots. It was the most destructive riots in U.S. history until that point. And Koreans took the blunt of the hit. And Korean immigrants, as you know, we have the largest number of Koreans living in Los Angeles outside of Asia.
Right.
And our immigrant community was hit really bad during the LA riots. And mainstream media, of course, was to blame for fanning the racial problem, so-called, that existed between Koreans and blacks, which basically was not true. They were just dumping the mainstream race problems on Korean immigrants. And Korean Americans were suffering. And I mean, I grew up in Los Angeles from the 70s. I knew where everything is, and of course, mainstream media, they didn't know where Koreatown, places where the places were burning were.
And not only did you had an understanding of the Korean community, and you also spoke the language, which meant that you probably had a better access to maybe covering the story accurately.
Yeah. I mean, as journalists, our skills include being able to navigate around wherever we go. And I was the only one at the LA Times who could truly navigate around the Koreatown. And so I presented what I saw. And for journalists, what you see is the most valuable piece of news that you can report. And that's exactly what I did. I covered the Koreatown as it was being damaged and burned by looters during the riots.
It looks and sounds like one of the most dangerous times in LA. I didn't live through it, so I can't exactly recall what it was like. But based on recollections of, I think generations that came before me, it sounded devastating. What was it like on the ground going from, point A to point B, seeing these young men armed in towns that they want to protect?
If you look at Ukraine this week, that's how Koreans were in LA during the riots. They were fighting for their existential, rights to protect themselves from these the looters and rioters, and they just brought out the guns and protected themselves because cops weren't there. LAPD left Koreatown on its own. They did not protect the Korean community.
And they want to protect predominantly white towns first, right? From what I understand.
Exactly. Yeah, they set up a barricade outside Koreatown and made sure that no rioters would come across those areas outside of Koreatown.
With an anniversary approaching quickly, I think it was really important for us to talk about the 92 LA riots. Actually, before we talk about the Bill Clinton impeachment trial you also covered, I want to talk about these dangerous areas where reporters actually go to rather willingly, including your coverage of the 1987 pro-democracy movement in Korea and the coverage of the LA riots. You seem to have gone to these most dangerous places on your own. What actually compelled you to go?
Well, for photojournalists, we have to see what we have to report. There's no such thing as finding out afterwards to report something that we need to photograph in real time. So for us, it's a prerequisite that we get to places where things are happening. Otherwise, the news is all about hearsay and secondhand information.
Sure.
So for us, making logistical plans to be where there might be news and where there is news are critical to what we do.
In this day and age where really anyone can pick up their phones or buy a camera much more affordably and point and shoot, what is photojournalism? And do you think the scope has expanded to embrace maybe more of amateur photography?
Well, photography is just like grammar. Anybody can say what they want to say or what they want to express. Not all of it is history or literature. Photojournalism is area of photography where trained professional visual storyteller compose pictures that are storytelling. And when the storytelling picture has a unforgettable moment, that readers will walk away with an impression that they can never get rid of. And that's the impact of photojournalism, where people can get information, lots of information about what's going on in single photograph, and that stays with them forever.
At the risk of sounding cliche, a picture is usually worth 1,000 words, maybe even more if you're in the front line of covering the LA riots or a democracy movement, as you've said.
Exactly. I mean, pictures have stopped wars. Pictures have changed public perception about what's going on. And pictures, of course, other times reinforce stereotypes. And other times it changes the stereotypes that people have. So those are the impact that the photojournalist can have in a situation. And a trained photographer, just like a well-versed writer, needs to know the language of photography, to know how not to exaggerate, how also to see through the facade and capture the truthful moment in every situation.
So would that imply that it takes an extensive amount of research and connection to information before you go out there to shoot, right? That's a pretty vital part of photojournalism.
Exactly. 90% of photojournalism is all about logistics, including research, knowing the story, what to expect, and somewhat anticipate what the news is going to be on that day.
Then for some aspiring photojournalists out there, what are some then make or break qualities in a great photojournalist like yourself?
Well, first of all, photojournalists need to have curiosity. You have to want to learn about everything around you. And because the devil's always in the details. Photojournalist's job is to not to miss any details anywhere on any story. So learning to pay attention to details, learning to make sure that each photograph is clearly full of messages instead of jumbled visual noise that where a reader has to navigate through to find something. No, those are not usable pictures. So to be trained in photojournalism means to have a clarity of a vision, how to see things visually, and learning to replicate that with the photograph, with the camera.
It sounds absolutely complex, just the art of photojournalism, right? An extensive amount of research sounds already pretty stressful.
Well, I've been at it for 40 years and I'm still learning. And I'm telling you that I have never been a better photographer because I'm better today than yesterday. We learn from every day through our mistakes and through our experiences.
So it's a continuous growth experience, even for 40 years. Because we alluded to it, I do want to take our listeners back to the Bill Clinton impeachment trial. There's even a Netflix show that tells Monica Lewinsky's story. It seems to be a relevant topic today, even after all these years. What was it like in the forefront of covering that trial?
Well, in Washington, perception is reality. So how politicians make the story appear to be what it is something that they are masters at. And for journalists, for us, we need to navigate that through and try to show images that are historic, that are meaningful, and that are storytelling. And you know, when Kenneth Starr, the prosecutor, was testifying during a House hearing for like 11 hours. I was in the next room filing those pictures in real time, trying to capture moments that will live in history in the historical context forever. So you got to have the perspective that not only just shows what it seems, but that shows what the real story is. The human aspect of everybody involved, the agony that they go through, the difficulties that everybody is confronted with dealing with this, and those are all embedded in body languages of people.
Sure.
And photography in Washington D.C. is a lot about exploring the body languages, the moments that can be iconic someday. And the politicians are the nicest people in America because that's their job, to be nice, to get votes. So you have to see through the niceness to see how tough that they are, how mean that they are, and sometimes how wrong that they are. And sometimes you can show that through pictures, because pictures don't lie when you are paying attention to actual moments.
And sometimes it takes hindsight for us to go back and revisit those same pictures and maybe pick up on details that weren't so evident all those years ago, because I do remember the Clinton-Lewinsky trial, and it clearly seemed to paint, generally speaking, who is the villain of the story. It was overwhelmingly Lewinsky back then, right?
Well, that's how the entertainment aspect of the media took the story to, and those pitfalls are part of the journalism. When American journalism is gamed, like the previous president, the journalists themselves become victim of that trap. And because the commercial aspect of the television journalism is that they have to do everything to make sure that the watchers, the viewers, do not change channels. And for them, sometimes it takes unfair practices for people to stay on the subject, even if that subject is telling the lie. And so for still photographers, for us, we have to, we don't have the luxury of showing everything. We have to just show in one picture, one moment sometimes, what the story is. And that picture has to stand up to the test of time and history to say that was the truthful moment on that day, not the facade that the television media have presented on that day.
Mr. Kang, I can't imagine a more appropriate time to have this conversation than now. We have an important presidential election coming up right here in South Korea. I think it's important for our listeners to remember there is a lot to that photograph. You talked about facade that is part of Washington, D.C. I'm sure it's evident in any political circles around the world.
Yes. Yeah.
All right.
Korean politics is a reflection of the Yangban culture.
Sure.
Yeah, the Yangban culture, when you go to those mask dance, 하회탈, the Yangban has two sides to his face. One side that he wants to show, depending on the audience, and the Korean politics is part of that. So the voters, the general public, they need to see through that, see through what the Yangban culture are trying to present.
Before we let you go, I do have to talk about your latest project, Visual History of Korea. First and foremost, beautiful photographs. I saw the one of the hallabong that you caught on Jeju-do Island, juxtaposed against snowfall. That's, for one, beautiful, but you provide all this context as to what a hallabong would mean for Jeju-do Island farmers, for example. And it just seems like a beautiful project. I do wonder, could you introduce this project for our listeners and why you decided to take part in it?
Well, the English language that we're speaking right now is the dominant language of the world, and it is the information and knowledge language of the world. Unfortunately, that English language does not have enough information about Korean history and culture and its civilization. And having grown up in the US and having worked in the mainstream media for 33 years, I can tell you that so many in English language culture lack basic information about Korean culture and history. And I, of course, was raising children and working in the US, so I couldn't come and report on Korea. But the first opportunity I got when I retired from Reuters, is to put together what I had been researching all along. And I just wanted to present the first impression of Korean culture and civilization to the English-speaking world through my pictures giving the first impression about each of those topics. And for me, having kids who are born in the U.S. and knowing so many Korean Americans who are looking for contents to be proud of about their ancestral land, I just wanted to leave something, as a legacy of my life, to leave a record of this documentation of Korean culture and history and civilization that was still present in the 21st century.
And I think
for future generations.
I think that's a beautiful project because I also grew up in California. And while I was growing up, although I did have exposure to Korean books and Korean historical context, it was difficult for me to find the equivalent in the English language to maybe better explain to my friends who weren't of a Korean family. I do want to ask you, I know your primary love in your career has been photojournalism, but do you ever see yourself delving into other forms of media art, such as videos?
Well, in 21st century, working photojournalists have to have fundamental skills to do video, still pictures, and text. We have to be a multimedia journalist. That's the only way we are marketable. So I do all of that, but at the end of the day, when people watch a 2-hour movie or film, they walk away with a single moment from that movie. That's a still image.
Yeah.
So to be able to summarize what we experience in life in a single image is the most challenging job of all of the visual media. And that is my training, and so that is the basis. And when you combine several moments of those single images, it becomes video footage. And so as needed, I do all of that.
Mr. Kang, where can some of our listeners keep in touch with you and keep up with your visual history of Korea project?
Well, the Random House Korea will publish the first volume of the visual history of Korea, a coffee table book, by this summer. So stay tuned for that. And you can keep up with what I do at kang.org, which is kang.org website, where I have a summary of my project there. And my plan is to document as much as I can of South Korea. I'm going to do the North Korea next after that.
You have an extensive line.
There are plenty of history and culture on the north side of the peninsula that we haven't been able to see.
All right, a lot of projects to look forward to, and I'm a big fan of coffee table books, so I'll be on the lookout for it as well. Thank you so much for speaking to us. Have a great day.
Thank you for having me.
It was a pleasure.
Likewise.
If you're listening to our program using the podcast service, just a reminder that we do go live Monday through Friday, 7 a.m. Korea Standard Time. So tune in and help us make the show more informative by giving us your input. See you bright and early on Good Morning Seoul.